Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
I remember years ago having a boss. I worked in public accounting, Big Six accounting. It's high paced. There's lots of pressure. Billion-dollar organizations, auditing, doing tax work, consulting work for Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies, and others around the world. So I had a boss, and there was always pressure, and he was stressed. He didn't hide it well. And he lashed out, and there were multiple bosses there. So we'll call them partners. They were called partners, and different people dealt with it differently. And he was kind of beat the drums. Who do I need to fire today? Was he often remarked, or occasionally remarked? I shouldn't say often, but occasionally remarked. Need to get something done. I need to get people's attention, and It didn't hit well. I think in today's day and age, it probably would hit less well, but it didn't hit well. And he knew it, and we all want to be liked. We all want to be accepted. And, looking back now, I kind of realize, I realize he probably had insecurities, even though in our mind as, 25, 26-year-olds, oh my gosh, this guy is the boss, and he holds our whole careers in his hands. He probably had insecurities about us and wanted to be accepted by us. And so occasionally he would make these, I wouldn't say they're New Year's resolutions, but, well, I guess any day can be a new year, as I indicated in a podcast episode recently. I re-released an episode. But he would make these, try to make these changes. I'm just going to be better. I'm going to be nicer. I'm just going to be that better boss. And what would end up happening, and I'm not being critical of him, well, I am being critical of him, but it's not unique to him. What would end up happening is he would fall back into his old ways. And I just did a whole program on patterns. And I had an interview with Molly Brown, that I released a few weeks back. Same thing, talking about patterns and breaking these patterns. And so he would fall back into these patterns. And you know what? Kind of comes by him honestly. If you listen to my most recent episode where I talked about patterns and how we all just sort of default to our relationship patterns. And it reminded me of a study that I talked about with a friend of mine, a franchisee in AmSpirit Business Connections, Tom Anderson, and we were talking about something. We're preparing for a conference, and we were talking about a particular study that was out there, and it was something that I had read in Psychology Today, and I had remarked about. It was kind of funny because he came to me and he said, "Where's that study?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I can't find it. I don't know where it's at. Was it in a book? Where was it?" And he ended up looking it up online, and I was joking with him. We were texting back and forth. I said, "You probably think I make these things up, but I don't." So it was a study out there. It was in Psychology Today. And it was a July 27th, 2022 article. And the title of the article is, "If you want to be happy, don't chase happiness." And what they talk about in this study, and I'll relate this back to relationships and my boss and just networking in general or relationships in general. What they talk about in this study is that people, what they did was they had two groups of people, and they had, they probably had three groups. They probably had one group, they did nothing. And then another group where they said, listen, just focus on being happy. Make that the center of your focus. And there were different iterations of the study. Sometimes they would have them watch a clip on, how to focus on being happy, or might read an article on it, or get them to engage in some sort of thinking about, just be happy. Just be happy. And so that was the second group. The first group, control group, they did nothing. But the other kind of experimental group, what they did was they said, okay, watch this clip showing people doing things. Of course, they don't tell the people, showing people doing certain things that tend to make people happy. For example, walk in the park, playing with their kids, out for a dinner on the town, a dinner with a loved one, or things like that. And they got people, this other group of people, they got them viewing, looking at, doing the things that drive happiness. And not surprising, the people who did the things that drove happiness were much more happy than the people who focused on being happy. And there are reasons for this they talk about in the study, and go ahead and look up the article and read the article yourself. Again, it's Psychology Today. I got it online. We got it online, July 27th, 2022. If you want to be happy, don't chase happiness. And so go ahead and look at it if you want to see that particular study. But I relate this back to my boss, because my boss would come in and I'm just going to be a better person. And he would focus on being a better person. But the problem with that, just like the problem with, hey, I'm going to be happy, is there really is no definition for being happy. It's very elusive. And, if I won $1 million, yeah, I'd be happy, but the hedonics, I would kind of slowly come back to normal. So it's called hedonic treadmill. I would kind of come back to normal, and having $1 million would just be an everyday, 6 months from now, and I would just kind of default back to my level of happiness. And so it's happiness is very subjective. Let's put it that way. There are people out there. I had a client who, I don't think she made $15,000. She was so happy. She was so happy. This was back when I practiced law, and I had other clients that made 20 times what she did and were just miserable. But at any rate, happiness is kind of subjective, and being a good person is kind of subjective. And so my boss would, and he was a good guy. He really was a good guy. He, married, family man. He just did the best he could, and I know he had people beating on him from above, wanting results, and he was just trying to get results. He was just trying to hang on to his job like I was, right? And so, hey, I'm going to be a better person. Well, what does that mean? That's the problem. You don't know what it means, and he would have been better off, saying, you know what, I am going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to take the time to go have lunch with, people. Once a month or, once a quarter, I'm going to have lunch with every one of the people on my staff, which, would have, hey, it really probably would have amounted to every day or once a week, I'm going to have lunch with somebody on my staff. Much like some people I'm going to have lunch with, once a month I have I go to lunch with my kid, each of my kids separately. It's just me and them. But that's something that's measurable, right? It's kind of like happiness. You know what? I'm not going to focus on being happy, but I'm going to make sure that I go home and I play catch with my son every day, or my daughter. I'm going to go home and, we're going to have, my wife and I are going to have a date night, and those things drive happiness. We're going to just go for a walk. Those things you can control. You can't kind of keep your mind fixated on, okay, I'm going to be happy. If you listen to the last episode, I talked about having your arms stretched out to the side. And, can you hold them? Well, you can hold them, but after a while, they start to get heavier and you kind of lose focus and they kind of go down, go down, go down. And that was happening to my boss. It's like, I'm trying to be a good guy. I want to be a good guy. But you know what? When the stresses came in, it became a little more difficult. And he really wasn't doing the things that would help him be a good person. And so he would default to his same old ways. Again, came by it honestly. I think there's a lesson in here for all of us, in that if you want to change things about you, you have to do the things that create the change. if you want to be a better listener, you can't just say, you know what, I'm going to be a better listener. You need to do something that's going to help you become a better listener. And there's lots of different techniques for, becoming a better listener. I'm going to take notes, or I'm going to, as I'm listening, Dr. Tim Schurer, he has one of the things he has people do is he has them listen for the last letter of the last word that somebody says, and then you need to start your sentence with that as well. It's a listening exercise, and there are lots of different listening exercises that can be a little cumbersome. If you're at a social setting with people you don't necessarily know, and you're really trying to understand what they're saying. But there are lots of different things. But the point is that you can't have the big thing without tackling the little things. You can't be a better person, however you define that, if you're not willing to do the little things that make you a better person. You can't be more generous unless you're focused on doing the things that make people generous. Well, I'm going to be a more generous person. Well, you need to stop and you need to do the things that can help make you more generous. I'm going to make sure that every week I give money to the church. I'm writing checks out, or I'm just, whatever I need to do. I'm going to take time and I'm going to make 3 introductions every day or every week or whatever it is. And those are the things that cast you as being generous, not just saying, hey, I'm going to be more generous, because you lose track of those sorts of things. I'm going to be more networked. That's my goal. Well, you have to do the things that make you more networked. You've got to get up and you've got to get out of your office, and you've got to do the things, the little things that drive the bigger things. So just something to think about if you're trying to make a change. And if you don't feel you need to make a change, that's great. But if there's something where you need to make a change, you need to sit down and say, okay, what is it the change? What change do I want to make? And what are the component pieces of those things that create that can create the change? If it's about happiness, then it's going for a walk, playing with your kids, spending time with loved ones, going to a movie, or whatever it is that make you happy. And those are the things that'll make you happy, not just sitting there and saying, I want to be happier, or I want to be a better person, or I want to be more generous, or I want to be a better listener. You've got to deal with the component parts first.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today, and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.